Hello everyone, this is episode 2 of the St. Paul and Stylometrics lecture series where we examine what stylometry is and its application to Pauline studies. In the last episode, we discussed definitions of stylometry, and in this episode we'll be looking at how stylometry is actually applied through discussion and analysis of the American corpus of letters supporting the Constitution known as the Federalist Papers. So the Federalist Papers were 85 essays published anonymously supporting the idea of the United States adopting a constitution. These essays remained anonymous until Alexander Hamilton provided a list to his lawyer attributing authorship of each letter to Hamilton, John Jay, or James Madison. Hamilton was killed shortly after in a duel with Aaron Burr, so his list is his only surviving testimony as to the letter attributions. Then in 1818, after Madison had left the presidency, he provided his own attribution list to a publisher, which left 12 essays in dispute about the true author. So the facts as they stood in 1818 were that there were 73 undisputed letters and 12 disputed letters. The question is, how can we address this problem and attempt to resolve the authorship dispute? Well, one way we can address the problem is by turning to stylometry for a less subjective testimony about the style of each disputed letter. Recall A.Q. Morin's definition of stylometry from our last lesson, where he states that it is used to determine authorship versus other candidates who had been speaking or writing in the same time period on the same subject and for similar reasons. And this is precisely the circumstance of the Federalist Papers, where there are two contesting authors, Hamilton and Madison, who were contemporaneous, writing on the same subject and for the same reason of supporting the Constitution. Recall also that the way stylometry is practiced is by measuring linguistic features to define an author's fingerprint, also called stylome, by which we can compare disputed texts against to see if they are similar to the stylome and thus make probabilistic claims about authorship. In 1963, two researchers, Mostel and Wallace, did just that in a paper titled Inference in an Authorship Problem. In this study, they tested word frequency usages in the undisputed Hamiltonian and Madisonian corpuses to identify writing patterns of each of the authors. In total, they measured 165 different word frequencies and found convincing discriminators. The best discriminator they found was the word upon, which was used by Hamilton about 18 times more frequently per 1,000 words. The general idea here is that once they identified these patterns, they could analyze the word frequencies of the disputed letters and see if the markers aligned with Hamilton's or Madison's tendencies. If the vast majority of indicators aligned with a specific author's tendencies, there's a high probability that they are the author. So the researchers concluded that Madison was the author of the disputed letters, and the mathematical probability of his authorship was at least 80-1 based on the word frequency usages. So this is convincing evidence that stylometry can be used effectively to make probability claims about authorship under certain conditions. And to highlight those conditions, I'd like to point out three things. First, Mostel and Wallace were able to base their stylomes on known letters from each author. This means they did not have to guess what were good indicators of authorship, nor apply general tendencies in the English language to the authors. Second, the letters were of a similar length, genre, and time period, so many confounding factors that affect style were already controlled for. Lastly, these letters were anonymous, but were not forgery attempts. And what I mean by that is that in these letters there was no evidence that anyone was trying to mimic another person's style. This is important because we are able to have more trust in the discriminators when parties are not attempting to obfuscate their style. So, now you know that stylometry can be practically useful and effective. And our next episode will be discussing debates surrounding the authenticity of Paul's letters and where stylometry fits into Pauline studies.